Imagine a small landmass about 100 kilometers wide. On the map, it looks tiny, but in terms of strategic importance, it's huge. This place is called the Suwałki Corridor, squeezed between Poland and Lithuania. This could be the site of the next major crisis between NATO and Russia. So why is that? On one side of this corridor lies Kaliningrad, Russia's heavily fortified military exclave, equipped with Iskander missiles capable of carrying nuclear warheads and the Baltic fleet. On the other side of the corridor is Belarus, Russia's most loyal ally, which has effectively become a Russian military base. For the Kremlin, Suwałki is a potential land bridge connecting these two regions, right at the heart of NATO. For NATO, Suwałki is an Achilles heel. It is the only land route connecting Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia to their allies in Europe. Another reason why the Suwałki Corridor is seen as a potential flashpoint between NATO and Russia, in addition to its geostrategic characteristics, is that the most intense tensions in recent times have again been experienced here. With Poland's Eastern Shield project and the downing of Russian UAVs by Polish F-16s on the night of September 9th to 10th, tensions have already escalated to a critical level. Russia's control of this narrow passage could instantly isolate the Baltic states and leave NATO facing a fait accompli. To understand why the Suwałki Corridor is so critical, one needs to look less at military strategy and more at a simple geography lesson. This 100-kilometer narrow strip is the most vulnerable, most fragile, and most strategically vital point of the NATO alliance. As American military officials have repeatedly stated, this is one of the alliance's most critical centers. If this center is captured, the entire Baltic flank could be paralyzed. This is not an exaggerated comment, but an expression of a harsh geographical reality. This narrow strip of land represents a geographical anomaly that could allow Russia to drive a dagger into the very heart of NATO's collective defense commitment. The first and most obvious consequence of the ripple effect is the geographical isolation of three NATO members: Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. These three countries have no other land connection to their NATO allies except for this narrow corridor through Poland. Although the accession of Finland and Sweden to NATO strengthens sea routes, roads and railways remain critical for the rapid deployment of heavy military equipment, tanks, artillery, and tens of thousands of troops. If Russia were to sever this corridor with a simultaneous military operation from Kaliningrad to the west and from Belarus to the east, the Baltic states would instantly become an island cut off from NATO Europe. This could represent a strategic victory for Putin. It would not only test NATO's Article 5 commitment, but could render it physically impossible. Second, the geographical structure of the Suwałki Corridor is a trap that makes conventional defense extremely different. According to Politico's regional analysis, the terrain consists of dense forests, numerous lakes, swamps, and rugged terrain. It is nothing like the open plains of Germany or France. This geography naturally hinders the rapid maneuvering and deployment of large armored units, namely tank battalions. While this may seem like an advantage for defending NATO forces, it also provides the perfect ground for the Kremlin's favorite type of warfare, namely hybrid warfare. This point is tailor-made for the Kremlin's approach, known as the Gerasimov Doctrine, which combines military and non-military methods. It is seen as a much more likely scenario that Russia will destabilize this region before launching a large-scale conventional attack that would directly trigger NATO's Article 5. The dense forested terrain provides an ideal hiding and infiltration area for small, highly trained sabotage groups and unmarked forces, known as Spetsnaz, which also emerged during the annexation of Crimea. This scenario has already been tested multiple times, with illegal migrant flows directed towards Poland via Belarus. This was not an innocent humanitarian crisis, but an armed migration operation. Sabotage groups mixed in with these migrant flows could target critical infrastructure passing through the Suwałki Corridor. Lithuania's efforts to expand and modernize military roads in the Suwałki region to strengthen its defense against potential Russian threats are aimed precisely at addressing this vulnerability. Combined with cyber attacks from the Kremlin, this narrow passage could be paralyzed without the need for a full-scale invasion. This makes Suwałki not just a Polish or Lithuanian issue, but an existential problem for the entire NATO alliance. In fact, the Suwałki Corridor has been part of military analysts' theoretical crisis scenarios for a decade. So why did this theoretical risk suddenly become a hot, immediate crisis in the fall of 2025? The answer lies in a domino effect. Namely, a strategic move by Poland and the Kremlin's harsh military response to that move. We need to look at the first domino, that is, Poland's Eastern Shield project. Announced in 2024, This project is considered the most ambitious fortification plan Europe has seen since World War II. According to Reuters, this project, implemented with a budget of approximately $2.5 billion, aims to transform Poland's 418-kilometer border with Russia and Belarus into a modern fortress. This is not a simple border wall, but a multi-layered hybrid warfare defense doctrine. The Eastern Shield is designed to fully encompass the Suwałki Corridor. According to military analysis sources, the project consists of a combination of physical barriers, advanced technology, and military bases. Physical barriers include anti-tank trenches, concrete blocks known as dragon's teeth, minefields, and barriers to close strategic crossing points. The second piece of the domino is Putin's reaction. For the Kremlin, the Eastern Shield is not a defense, but a preparation for attack. The Putin administration claims that this project is an aggressive NATO buildup and disrupts the military balance in the region. Analyses published by Russia's official news agency repeatedly emphasize that this shield is part of a policy to encircle Russia, and that Moscow will take the necessary military and technical measures. Putin's anger stems particularly from Poland's investment in technological sensors and anti-UAV systems that will render Russia's most effective weapon, hybrid warfare, ineffective. The third domino is military and technical measures. On the night of September 9th to 10th, 2025, we saw what these measures look like. NATO radars on Sweden's Gotland Island and possibly AWACS early warning aircraft detected at least 3 high-altitude UAVs taking off from the Achilles air base in Kaliningrad and heading over the Baltic Sea. According to flight tracking data, this was not a routine patrol flight. Their transponders were off, and they were heading directly into airspace adjacent to Poland's territorial waters. This was an electronic reconnaissance operation. The Russian UAVs were flying a route designed to test the radar response time, radar lock-on frequencies, and intervention procedures of Poland's new Eastern Shield. But this time, they crossed the line. At least 2 of the UAVs began advancing towards the strategic Suwałki line, clearly violating Poland's sovereign airspace. NATO's Combined Air Operations Center in Germany issued an Alpha Scramble order. 2 fully loaded Polish F-16C Block 52+ aircraft took off from Poland's 32nd Tactical Airbase in Lask and were directed straight to the area for interception. Simultaneously, 2 F-35A Lightning II fighter jets belonging to the Royal Netherlands Air Force, stationed in Malbork as part of NATO's Baltic air policing mission, also took off. The presence of the Dutch F-35s changed the rules of the game. Today's tension focused on the Suwałki Corridor reflects a deeper and more historical rift in the European security architecture. The events of the night of September 9th are not an isolated incident, but the final act of a historical recurrence. There is a comparison increasingly made by senior U.S. commanders and military analysis centers such as the Modern War Institute. According to this analogy, the Suwałki Corridor is the 21st century reincarnation of the Cold War's Fulda Gap. Understanding this analogy is critical to understanding the Kremlin's mindset and why NATO is so concerned. During the Cold War, the Fulda Gap was a geographically ideal corridor in West Germany, stretching from the East German border to Frankfurt, for the advance of armored units. NATO strategists were almost certain that if World War III broke out, Soviet tank armies would use this gateway to attack Western Europe. For years, NATO based all its exercises, defense planning, and even some nuclear strategies on this zero point. That threat seemed to evaporate with the collapse of the Soviet Union, but the underlying geopolitical logic, the logic of attacking the weakest point, is now being revived in Suwałki. However, this analogy also highlights an important difference. The Fulda Gap was based on a symmetrical clash of massive conventional armies, thousands of tanks. Suwałki, on the other hand, has a much more complex, much more insidious and gray threat structure. This is a battlefield that perfectly combines the conventional threat of Russian armored units with hybrid warfare tactics and cyber attacks. That is why Politico magazine published that famous article in 2022, immediately after the invasion of Ukraine, describing the region as the most dangerous place in the world. This was an identification of the most critical and most easily exploitable geographical weakness in the West's defense architecture. Politico's analysis was based on the following. This region is located not where NATO is strongest, but where it is weakest, where it is most vulnerable. U.S. commanders are also aware of this reality. The fact that American artillery units are conducting live-fire exercises near the Suwałki Gap shows that this region is now coded as a front line, not a backyard. These exercises are seen as both a deterrent message to the Kremlin and a rehearsal for how to fight in this challenging terrain. The region's dense forest cover, swamps, and lakes could make an ambush and attrition war, similar to what happened in the forested areas of northern Ukraine, inevitable. This historical context makes Suwałki not just a piece of land, but also a symbolic arena where NATO's credibility and the Kremlin's revisionist ambitions collide. What if this corridor falls? The fall of the Suwałki Corridor would not be merely a regional military defeat. Such a possibility could be the most devastating strategic paralysis NATO has experienced in its 75-year history. This could be the final step in Putin's larger plan to undermine NATO from within. This is a doctrine-undermining and domino effect scenario. If the Kremlin pushes the button to seize Suwałki, the domino effect will be brutal. No matter how bleak Russia's plans for Suwałki may seem, NATO is not sitting idle to strengthen this Achilles heel. The alliance, especially after the bitter lessons of the Ukraine war, is shifting from a deterrence model to a local defense model. The old strategy relied on allowing Russia to invade the Baltic states and then rescuing them with a massive army. This tripwire strategy is now gone. The atrocities in Bucha and Irpin, Ukraine, proved that defense in place is the only moral and strategic option. The Suwałki and Baltic lines are where this new doctrine is being tested. The first layer of this defense is physical and concrete. We are talking about the Baltic Defense Line. This initiative, jointly announced by Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania in early 2024, is the most comprehensive fortification project built in Europe since the Cold War. This is not just a project involving barbed wire. According to international media reports, this line consists of hundreds of kilometers of dragon's teeth, minefields, and strategically placed shelter networks designed to slow the advance of Russian armored units and direct them into kill zones. It has been reported that Estonia alone plans to build approximately 600 concrete shelters along its border with Russia. These shelters are designed to enable small infantry units to defend themselves against heavy Russian artillery and set up ambushes using modern anti-tank missiles such as Javelin or Spike. This is a direct application of Ukraine's lesson. That is, slow down, fragment, and destroy. Simultaneously, Poland is also taking additional security measures. These measures lock down the southern flank of the line. Poland is investing in technology as well as physical barriers located in the eastern shield. The border, including the Suwałki Corridor, is being transformed into a smart border, supported by advanced anti-UAV systems, seismic sensors that detect even the smallest movement on the ground, and Poland's new HIMARS rocket systems. These elements aim to detect and neutralize any hybrid attacks or sabotage that the Kremlin might plan before they even begin. The third leg of NATO's move against the Kremlin in Suwałki is logistical. That is, we are talking about speed. Lithuania is modernizing and expanding military roads and railway infrastructure in the Suwałki region to enable NATO reinforcements to reach the area quickly. As United 24 media emphasizes, a new weapons route is being created that will pass through Suwałki. It is stated that these new highway and infrastructure projects are the lifelines that could save NATO from Putin's aggression. Finally, in NATO's move against the Kremlin in Suwałki, there is the alliance's lake factor. Finland and Sweden's accession to NATO has redrawn the strategic map of the Baltic Sea. The Baltic Sea has effectively become a NATO lake. This has transformed Russia's Kaliningrad exclave from a fortress into a strategic weakness that can be easily isolated by NATO. In a potential conflict, the Russian Baltic fleet could be trapped in its ports under fire from Sweden's Gotland Island and the Finnish-Swedish navies. This situation makes any Russian move towards Suwałki logistically much riskier, militarily much more costly, and strategically a gamble that could amount to suicide. The stage now appears set. The Suwałki Corridor has become the place where the ghosts of the Cold War's Fulda Gap meet the brutal realities of Ukraine's drone and artillery warfare. On one side are Russia's fait accompli and hybrid warfare doctrines. On the other, NATO's defense in place and Baltic Shield fortifications. Ultimately, the Suwałki Corridor may appear to be just a 100-kilometer line on a map. This line represents the boundary of NATO's collective defense pledge and the credibility of the Western alliance. It remains unclear whether the next crisis will arise from a drone violation, a cyber attack, or an act of sabotage. However, one thing is certain. The fate of this narrow corridor, called the most dangerous place in the world, could determine the fate of Europe's security. So what are your thoughts on this? Your thoughts are very important to us. Therefore, please don't forget to share your opinions in the comments section and like our video. Thank you for watching.